Let me check the used names file to make sure I avoid all of them. The names to avoid are all listed in the document. Now let me write the story with completely new characters. I was sitting in my truck in the parking garage of Meridian Financial at 11:22 a.m. on a Wednesday in October, watching my laptop screen through the kind of calm that only comes after you've already accepted the worst. The conference room on the 14th floor was visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass. I knew the layout by heart. I'd practically lived in that building for 9 years, and I could see the moment it happened. The presentation froze. Then the screen went dark. Then, one by one, every workstation in the room did the same. 43 minutes earlier, my badge had stopped working at the front entrance. That's where I should probably start. My name is Dorian. I'm 51 years old. I drive a 10-year-old F-150. And for 9 years I was the head of systems architecture at Meridian Financial Group, a mid-size investment management firm out of Columbus, Ohio, that handled somewhere north of $2 billion in client assets. I built their entire back-end infrastructure from the ground up, not managed it, not inherited it, built it. Every data pipeline, every encryption layer, every compliance reporting tool that kept them out of trouble with the SEC. I wrote the original codebase for their proprietary portfolio analytics engine, the thing their sales team called Meridian OS, in every pitch deck, on nights and weekends during my first year there, before I even had a full team. I also, as it turned out, owned the patent on the core algorithm that ran it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My boss. I'll call him my boss because that's what he was. Technically, though, obstacle might be more accurate, had been the CEO of Meridian for about 3 years when things started going sideways. He came in from private equity. He wore the kind of suits that cost more than my truck and talked constantly about scalability and brand narrative in ways that made the engineers in my department exchange looks across the conference table. He wasn't stupid. I want to be fair about that. He understood money. He understood optics. What he did not understand, and had no interest in learning, was how the machine actually worked. That was fine, mostly, because I kept the machine running and he kept the investors happy and we stayed out of each other's way. Until his son showed up. His son was 24. He'd graduated from a decent school with a business degree and had spent the previous 2 years doing something in digital marketing that appeared to involve posting content online and attending conferences. He was personable. He had his father's confidence without his father's track record to back it up. And sometime in late August, my boss decided that his son should join the company and be placed, not in sales, not in client relations, not in any of the dozen roles where his actual skills might have been useful, but in my department. Specifically, he wanted me to train his son to take over as head of systems architecture. I found out the way you find out about things that are already decided, through a calendar invite. No conversation first. No, hey Dorian, I want to run something by you. Just a meeting request titled Transition Planning Systems Team with his son CC'd. Sent at 7:48 on a Tuesday night. I sat with that calendar invite for a long time. I thought about 9 years. I thought about the 2019 compliance crisis, when a regulatory audit flagged 3 reporting anomalies, and I spent 11 straight days rewriting the data reconciliation layer to get them clean before the SEC follow-up. I thought about the ransomware attempt in 2021 that my intrusion detection system caught 40 minutes before it would have encrypted the client portfolio database. I thought about the 3 engineers on my team, people I'd hired, trained, and fought for every raise cycle, who trusted me to tell them the truth about where things stood. I declined the meeting, not the job. I didn't quit. I just declined the calendar invite and sent a short reply. I'd like to discuss this in person before we move forward. Do you have time this week? He replied the next morning. His reply was 4 sentences. The last one was, "This decision has already been made." I went to see him anyway. His office had a view of the Scioto River. He was on a call when I knocked, held up one finger, finished his conversation, and then looked at me the way executives look at problems they've already decided to stop managing. "Dorian," he said, "I think the email was pretty clear. I want to understand the reasoning, I said. I kept my voice level. I'd practiced that on the elevator. The company is evolving. We need leadership that understands where we're going, not just where we've been. I let that sit in the air for a second. He doesn't have a systems background, I said. He's never worked in financial infrastructure. The compliance requirements alone take years to. He'll learn. He smiled like he was doing me a favor by ending the conversation. We're going to need you to prepare a full transition document. 4 weeks. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, I'll need to review my employment contract before I can commit to a timeline. He blinked, just slightly. That's not really. I want to make sure we're all on the same page about IP ownership and transition scope, I said. I'll have my attorney take a look. I thanked him for his time and left. Here's what he didn't know. When I joined Meridian 9 years earlier, I came in as an independent contractor for the first 8 months. The full-time offer came later after I'd already built the first version of the analytics engine. My attorney at the time, a very sharp woman I'd worked with on a previous engagement, had structured my contractor agreement with a standard IP retention clause. Any work product I created during the contract period remained my intellectual property unless explicitly assigned in writing. It hadn't been explicitly assigned in writing. When I transitioned to full-time employment, that agreement was never revisited. The new employment contract referenced company systems and tools, but didn't specifically address the analytics engine or its underlying methodology. Nobody caught it. Why would they? Nobody on the business side understood what the engine actually was or how it worked. To them, it was a feature in a pitch deck. To me, it was 400 hours of original work I'd done before I was technically their employee. I'd filed the patent 18 months after I came on full-time. It was a defensive move. I wasn't planning anything, I just wanted the record to exist. My attorney had advised it. You never know, she'd said. Companies forget what they own. You shouldn't forget what you own. I hadn't forgotten. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything quietly. Not to sabotage anything. I want to be clear about that. I documented it because I needed to know where I stood. I went back through every contract, every amendment, every email chain that touched the analytics engine. I met with my attorney twice. She confirmed what I already suspected. The patent was mine. The licensing arrangement between me and Meridian had always been implicit, a handshake built into a relationship. And that handshake had just been broken. She also pointed out something I hadn't fully considered. The analytics engine wasn't just a tool Meridian used internally. They'd built their entire client-facing product around it. Their pitch to new institutional clients literally led with it. The upcoming Series C fundraising round. I'd heard about it in passing. $40 million planned for November depended on it. Due diligence for a round that size would include a full IP audit. When's the round? She asked. First week of November, I said. She nodded slowly. That's 6 weeks. I didn't hear anything official for another 10 days. Then, on a Thursday morning, I was called into HR. The HR director was professional about it. She had a folder. She explained that Meridian had decided to restructure the systems leadership team and that my position was being eliminated. There was a severance package, 12 weeks, continuation of benefits, standard NDA. She slid the folder across the table. I looked at it. Can I take this home to review? I asked. Of course, she said. We'd appreciate a response by end of week. I picked up the folder. One question, I said. Has the legal team done a full review of IP ownership for the system's infrastructure? She looked at me. I'm not sure what you mean. Just making sure the transition is clean, I said. I'd hate for anyone to run into complications during due diligence. I thanked her and left. I did not sign the NDA. That afternoon, I had a conversation I'd been putting off. I called my lead engineer. 8 years on my team, the kind of person who could read a code base the way some people read novels, and I told him everything. Not to recruit him, not to make any ask. I just told him what was happening because he deserved to know and because he'd been suspicious for weeks and asking me sideways questions that I'd been deflecting. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. "So what are you going to do?" he said. "I'm going to let the timeline play out," I said. "I've already talked to my attorney. The IP situation is documented. I'm not going to fight them publicly. I'm just not going to pretend things are fine when they're not." Another pause. "Then I've been thinking about updating my resume anyway." "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. "I know," he said. "You didn't have to." Within a week, 2 of the other senior engineers on my team had quiet conversations with me. I was careful. I didn't make any promises. I didn't ask them to do anything. I just answered their questions honestly, and they made their own decisions. My last day was a Friday. I turned in my laptop, my badge, my parking pass. I cleaned out my desk in about 20 minutes. I'd never been much for accumulating things at work. My boss didn't come down to say goodbye. His son was already in the building, moving into the office next to mine, boxes stacked in the hallway. I drove home. I called my wife. I told her what had happened. She'd known it was coming. We'd talked about it plenty at home, but there's something different about the day it actually happens. "Are you okay?" she said. "Yeah," I said. And I was. I'd had 6 weeks to get there. The Series C due diligence kicked off 3 weeks later. I know the timing because my attorney got a call. The institutional investor, a Chicago-based private equity firm, had assigned a legal team to do the IP audit, and the IP audit had found my patent. They wanted to understand the licensing arrangement. My attorney told them politely and precisely that there was no formal licensing arrangement, that the patent was held by me, personally, that Meridian had been using the engine under an informal understanding that was no longer operative. The PE firm put the round on pause. I know what happened next because my former lead engineer, who had by that point quietly tendered his resignation, along with 1 other senior engineer, sent me a text that Wednesday morning. "You need to see this." He'd forwarded me a screenshot of an internal all-hands announcement. Meridian was temporarily pausing external partnership discussions to conduct a thorough review of internal systems documentation. The message was signed by my boss. It was written in the specific tone of someone trying to sound calm. That same morning, I got a call from Meridian's general counsel. She was direct. I respected that. She didn't pretend the situation was something other than what it was. She said they'd like to discuss a formal licensing arrangement. She said the company was prepared to be very reasonable. She asked if I'd be willing to meet. I said I'd have my attorney reach out. My attorney reach out. The negotiation took 3 weeks. I won't go into every detail because some of it is covered by the settlement, but the broad shape of it is this. Meridian entered into a formal licensing agreement for continued use of the analytics engine. The terms were structured as a percentage of revenue from any client account where the engine was used in the pitch or the management process. Given their current AUM and their pipeline, my attorney estimated the annual licensing fee at somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000, depending on how aggressively they grew. There was also a one-time retroactive payment for the 9 years of unlicensed use. I'm not going to say the number out loud, but it was enough that my wife cried when I told her, and she is not a person who cries easily. By the time the licensing agreement was signed, I'd already incorporated a new LLC. My former lead engineer came with me. So did the other senior engineer who'd left. We picked up 2 additional people from outside, one from a fintech startup in Austin, one who'd been at a quantitative hedge fund in New York and wanted to work somewhere smaller. 5 people total. We took a 2-room office in a building near downtown Columbus that had exposed brick and a coffee shop on the ground floor, and we started building the next version of the engine. Better architecture, cleaner compliance framework, built, this time, with ironclad IP documentation from day one. Our first client signed a contract 11 weeks after we incorporated. Mid-size RIA out of Cincinnati, about $800 million in assets under management. They'd heard about us through the PE firm that had paused Meridian's Series C. Funny how that works. A few months later, I was having lunch with one of my former colleagues. one of the people who'd stayed at Meridian, and she told me how things had played out internally. My boss had taken a lot of heat from the board over the IP situation. His son had lasted about 6 weeks in the systems role before it became clear to everyone involved that the transition wasn't working. He'd moved to a strategic initiatives title, which is what companies call it when they need to keep someone around but don't know where to put them. "Do you feel bad about any of it?" she asked me. I thought about that honestly. "No," I said. "I gave them 9 years. I tried to have the conversation. I told them what I needed, and they handed me a severance package and a folder. I took a sip of my coffee. I didn't do anything to them. I just stopped doing things for them." She nodded. She looked like she was thinking something she wasn't going to say out loud. "He still talks about you like you ambushed him," she said finally. "I know," I said. "People who've never had to earn anything tend to think the rules don't apply until they do. I don't tell this story to make myself sound like some kind of genius who had it all figured out from the beginning. I didn't. I spent a lot of nights that fall sitting at the kitchen table, not sure if I was making the right calls, second-guessing my attorney's advice, wondering if I was being too rigid when maybe I should have just negotiated earlier and saved everyone the drama. But here's what I keep coming back to. I asked for a conversation. I got a calendar invite with a decision already made. I asked to review my contract. I got told to prepare a transition document in 4 weeks. Every step I took was in response to something they did first. You spend 9 years building something from nothing, and the lesson you're supposed to take from it is, don't get attached to what you build. Always read your contracts. Know what you own, not because you're planning for the worst, but because the worst has a way of showing up on a Thursday morning with a folder and a smile. My wife asked me once, about a year after everything settled, if I'd have done anything differently. I told her I'd have filed the patent sooner. She laughed. Then she said, "I meant with the people, the ones who stayed." I thought about that. I'd have told them sooner, I said. The ones I trusted. I waited too long because I didn't want to worry anyone, but they were already worried. They just needed someone to be honest with them. She nodded. That's the part that mattered. She was right. It always is. The company is 3 years old now. We have 11 full-time people. We just signed our 6th institutional client. The analytics engine has gone through 2 full rewrites since the original. And what it can do now compared to what I built in that first apartment on Madison Avenue in Columbus 9 years ago is like comparing a compass to GPS. We're profitable, not we're doing okay profitable, genuinely, cleanly profitable, in a way that lets me sleep through the night. My former lead engineer is a partner. He deserved that from the beginning, and I told him so when we incorporated. Some days I drive past the Meridian building on my way to the office. It's a nice building, glass and steel, river view, the kind of address that impresses clients who don't know the difference between a building and a business. I don't feel anything particular when I drive past it. That surprised me the first few times. I thought I'd feel something, satisfaction maybe, or the ghost of an old grievance. But mostly I just think about what's on my calendar that day and whether I remember to start the coffee before I left the house. The best revenge, I've decided, isn't the moment the other person loses. It's the morning you realize you stopped keeping score. I've thought about this a lot since everything settled, what actually happened and why it went the way it did. Not the legal mechanics, not the licensing numbers. The part underneath all of that. My boss didn't lose because I outmaneuvered him. He lost because he'd spent years making decisions as if the people around him were interchangeable. As if 9 years of someone's work was just inventory he could transfer to whoever he wanted. When you treat human effort like a line item, you stop paying attention to the details. And the details, a contractor agreement, an IP clause, a patent filed quietly on a Tuesday afternoon, those are exactly the things that come back to matter. That's not luck, that's cause and effect, plain and simple. The choices compound. His choice to skip the conversation, to send a calendar invite instead of knocking on my door. That set everything in motion. My choice to actually read my contracts, to have an attorney I trusted, to file that patent when she advised it. That determined how it ended. I think about the version of me that didn't do those things, that signed the NDA on a Thursday because it was easier, that let the quiet resentment build without ever protecting himself legally. That version exists, and I've met him in plenty of other people. Smart, hardworking, completely unprepared for the moment the company decided they were done with him. That's not a failure of intelligence. It's a failure of the habit of thinking ahead, of asking yourself not just, am I doing good work, but do I understand the ground I'm standing on? The integrity piece matters too, and I don't say that to sound noble. I mean it practically. I never sabotaged anything. I never leaked information or tried to tank the Series C out of spite. I documented what was mine, I told the truth to my attorney, and I let the situation resolve itself honestly. That matters because if I'd gotten vindictive, if I'd tried to hurt them rather than just protect myself, I'd have handed them a narrative. I'd have been the problem. Instead, I was just a person who owned a patent and declined to license it under terms that hadn't been agreed to. Legally clean, morally clean. And when you operate that way, you don't spend years afterward looking over your shoulder. The resilience part is the one nobody talks about in those first weeks. The weeks when you don't know how it's going to go, when you're sitting at the kitchen table at 11 at night, running scenarios and none of them are certain. My wife, Audrey, she held a lot of that with me. She didn't pretend it wasn't hard. She just stayed steady, which made it possible for me to stay steady too. That's its own kind of wisdom that I don't take for granted. Seth, my lead engineer, made his own choice. I didn't ask him to leave. I just told him the truth. He decided what that truth meant for him. That's the only way I'd want it. People choosing freely, with full information, not because I pushed them anywhere. The company we built is real. The work is real. And the thing I come back to most often, when I think about what I'd want someone to take from all of this, is not the comeback or the licensing fee or any of that. It's the decision I made early, to know what I owned, to be honest about where things stood, and to not let the discomfort of a hard conversation talk me into giving away what I'd built. That decision cost me a job. It gave me everything after it.